Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns, the CEO and Chief Creator of Amazing Ideas at StudyingDigitalMarketing.com. I hope everybody's having an amazing day. Today, I'm here with my special guest, Lisa Pfau. Lisa is the owner of Pfau Academic Writing, Editing, and Coaching Experts, a business where she works with students, typically in university, to improve their academic endeavors. If you want more about Lisa after this podcast, you can see Pfau, spelled Pfau.ca. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation. Good day, everybody. I'm here with my friend Lisa Pfau. And how are you today, Lisa?
I'm pretty good, Rob.
Good. So, we've done work together, we've gotten to know each other, and I thought it would be great to sit and talk about something different that's not a technology business. And tell me a little bit about your background and why you got into the business you're in and a bit about your business.
So I have an academic background mostly. I have an undergraduate degree in political science and history, and then I spent a few years in China learning Mandarin. And then I went to graduate school and I continued to study Chinese politics and Chinese history. And I got a master's degree in Asian studies. And then I sort of traveled around, lived in China, worked in the Canadian embassy, taught some English, learned some more Chinese, was a project coordinator for a research project on HIV/AIDS in China. So I did a lot of China things.
Yeah.
And then also what I was doing, and that was kind of my process of figuring out what I was good at, what I liked, and I was also helping people always on the side, like helping them a lot with writing, communicating when I was teaching English as a second language. And so, over time, I felt like the government sector is not really for me because it's a little bit too structured. And the academic sector, I like it. I like the challenge. I like working with ideas. But there was just too much pressure to produce publications and do research. And what I really loved was helping students and teaching people. And so eventually I went through a little bit of a moment in when I turned 30, kind of like a life crisis. And there was a moment where it was like, well, Lisa, you could just try this out. Just make it a thing. Like, just try it as a business. And so I made a commitment of 3 years to myself. Like, I'm going to try this for 3 years. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to apply for graduate school and do my PhD. And so 3 years went by, and it became, so I started out with one client in Japan that I was teaching on Skype. And it grew, and 3 years went by, and it turned into a real business. And now I have other people working for me, and an office space. And I used to work part-time somewhere else, so I'm just doing this full-time, and I'm pretty happy. Like, this is what I want to do. And I think I like the part about being an entrepreneur because it gives you a lot more freedom. And you have to constantly be creative in solving problems, figuring out how to market yourself, training people, the next step. So, on the one side, that can be very stressful because there's a lot of uncertainty. But on the other side, it's fun because there's a lot of uncertainty. So you can try new things out. So it's kind of, you have to balance it.
But you and I both know you learn from what doesn't work, right? So as you know, I'm in the marketing game, and somebody said to me the other day, you make Facebook ads work really well. And I said, yeah, but if you saw the ads that have failed on other people's dimes, you know, you would be shocked. Like the failures help make the successes, and that's like so true. I don't think anybody that hasn't failed succeeds very well, and some of the greatest people in history have failed multiple times.
Yeah. Well, there's a really good proverb in Chinese that whenever things are going tough, I remember, and it translates to, failure is the mother of success.
I so agree with that, and I also think a lot of it is the reason people like you and I get into the entrepreneur game, growing for themselves, working for themselves, is that freedom factor. And it's not that we don't have clients. Like, people think you get out of the corporate world, you don't have a boss. That's not true. Your clients are actually your bosses. And
you have many bosses.
Many bosses, which in its sense can sometimes be more stressful than having one boss. But the reality of it all is, it's that freedom a little bit. Like, I know, for example, you don't work Mondays typically, so that's good for you. I know if I've got something I have to do in the middle of the day, I book it into my schedule, like I book a client appointment, and just find time to do it.
Oh.
You know, and it doesn't mean you don't get the work done. It means you can play around with the schedule sometimes a little bit. So Lisa, could you tell me about the services that your company offers, what your company does, and for the benefits of our listeners, please?
Sure. So our core business is essay writing and essay writing support. So let me be clear, we do not write essays for people. There's an entire business out there that does that, which I do not support. That's plagiarism. So we provide writing support, and we also provide academic essay editing. And so what that means is sort of directing students through the whole process of writing an essay, learning about how to do good research, learning about how to plan out your essay, the process of writing different parts of your essay, revisions, and adding in more research, different styles, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we also edit essays for publication, or when graduate students, they need to finish up their thesis and they want some extra editing, so we do that. But another thing we do, because students need extra help transitioning from high school to university, or university into their career. So we also provide support with the application writing process. So if you're applying to undergrad or college, graduate school, business school, law school, you often have to write personal statements or essays related to that. You have to put together a good package. So we provide that kind of support. And also transitioning from college or university into the professional sphere. We provide that kind of support, especially for people with arts degrees, because if you have an engineering degree or a business degree, they often provide a lot of career transition support in those departments. But if you have an English degree, they don't, and they kind of expect you're going to work in a coffee shop or something. So we really try to help those students figure out what skills they do have. And if they come in early enough, like if I have a first year student, I may start recommending things to them at that point that I know will help them to get a job in the future. For example, like not just doing your schoolwork well, but volunteering in something you're interested in. So you're making contacts and you're gaining other transferable skills. So I started out in writing, but over time I realized that the education system is missing a few things, and really specifically support and development around life skills or professional skills. So I think if you come here, you don't just get a tutor, you get a coach, and you get someone who's going to support you through your whole educational process and really help you to develop into a confident young adult who has the skills they need to succeed, you know, to get a job, to balance life and relationships, to learn how to manage money, to find good housing. We also provide like this kind of support and workshops more recently. So I'm trying to build what I like to call a holistic education approach. Yeah, so students come out well-rounded.
I would agree with that, and you sort of talk about a little bit about one, volunteering. I think that's one of the best ways you can network and meet great people. I've met amazing people over the years in my network, and you know, my wife always looks at me and says, you know, there's a lot of people you do know, and I said a lot of it's just from being involved. I mean, I've met everything from politicians to reporters to, you know, you name it. And then the other thing I really like you talk about is you talk about not just the academic side, but the money side, the relationship side, and all the other stuff, because I think it all intertwines, and people kind of lose sight of that and say, no, it's just about marks. Well, guess what? If the relationship side and the money side's not good, it impacts what you do in the school too. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and there's actually more and more research on that, like research on sleep and its connection to grades. We're going to do a talk on nutrition, and there's a link between like what you eat and your ability to concentrate and to take in new information. And I think we kind of know this because there's all these campaigns in the States, especially with these free lunch programs, because kids are going to school hungry when they're younger, and they know that's affecting their grades. But it's also more subtle than that. Like, it's also, what are you eating? You know, like, and how, and really like understanding these things, not from the point of view of like, oh, I want to be really cute and like attractive, so I'm just going to eat salad, but really, you know, how all these things actually help you to be the best person you can be. And just, by the way, just eating salad is not good enough. So I think the person, Sherilyn, friend of mine, is going to come in on August 10th and talk more about that, how different foods have different nutrients and how that feeds your brain or hinders your brain performance. So yeah, all of these things are linked. And like
even simple little things like if you're studying for, say, 3 hours for an exam, do you think to take a 10-minute walk break in between to stretch your body into? And I know, like, from somebody who runs out of a home office, I have 3 dogs, as you know, and I tend to take them outside in nice weather every 2 hours. And the reason for that is it forces me to get out of the chair every 2 hours. So even little things like that, little things like, do you have the right chair in your office? Do you have the right height of your computer? Do you, you know, all this is just greatly impact on the student experience today. So I would agree.
Yeah, and that's why we now are offering Tuesday meditation, because that, you know, being able to learning breathing techniques and visualization and positive self-talk can really help you to calm yourself down before you take an exam. And like, personally, I used to black out before every exam, and all of a sudden my brain would go blank. And somehow I just taught myself to take deep breaths, and then in about like a few minutes, everything would come back. But that can be really scary. And so, and I think that's just very human.
Yeah, and I think the word positive self-talk is really, really important. I mean, people, you know, have a tendency to gravitate around people who have similar problems to them. The problem with that is they tend to vent about their problems, and I'm not so sure all that negative venting is really good for the academics or anything in life. I think it's one thing to talk about it, but then either deal with it or move on kind of thing. I think being positive is a whole lot better, personally. But.
Yeah, well, I think that can happen when people get a bad grade, as they look for someone to blame.
Yep.
Or they look for something to blame. And so, and I always kind of tell my students, okay, first of all, let's take a look at what happened here. Did we make a mistake? Is there a mistake? Let's own some of those mistakes. And then if there's questions, let's go talk to the teacher, the teaching assistant, or whatever, and get some additional feedback. And don't look at this, don't take your grade personally. Don't think of it as a fail, but as an opportunity to learn something new. And really think of how boring it would be if you always got straight A's. I mean, it'd be great to always get straight A's, but I think it's much more satisfying if you got 60 in the beginning and then you work your way up to 95 or something.
I would agree.
Because that means you're learning a lot. You didn't go in with 95 and come out with 95. I mean, then what are you learning? 1%. I mean, you might be working really hard and be a super great student, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's something really satisfying about improving, feeling that you've improved. So before you go blame someone, see what you can learn. And it's a natural process. A lot of it's about expectation. You didn't understand the expectations of the professor, especially in arts degrees, right? So it's not necessarily about you wrote a bad paper, your ideas are bad. It's just about communication.
Oh, no doubt.
What they want and how to get better.
Yeah, I agree with that philosophy, 100%. So in university today, kids today have different challenges than when you went to school, I went to school. That all said, I still take courses. What is the biggest challenge of students today in the university world, in your opinion?
I mean, I think they're under a lot more pressure than you and me. I'm not that much older than them, 10 or 15 years older. And I feel like university is a lot less fun. I think it's just more competitive and higher expectations maybe put on them by their parents, society, the school, and a little less space for fun, challenging authority, having protests, doing silly things, that's kind of hindering their growth and their confidence and their ability to kind of think creatively, and that it's okay to do that and it's safe to do that. So I'm not really sure what the cause of that is, but I keep seeing it over and over and reading about it and reading about the increasing anxiety levels of students, and students are not going out with their friends as much and they're studying all the time. And so I'm not sure really exactly what's behind that, but to me, it seems like a problem, not only in school, but for building individuals for our future society. That there has to be some space to be creative and critical of the dominant ideas, So, yeah.
I would agree with you. I mean, you look at, even young adults who have come out of school today, they don't go out with their friend as much. They're not as creative. I think people in creative jobs that are younger have a problem thinking creatively. A lot of them think too linear for my liking, if you know what I mean. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 1, 2, 7, 8, 3, 1. Like if you ask them to think that process, they don't always get it. And I think it's just creating this whole mess where, as people, I don't think we're as open today to others, and I think that's just a byproduct of how kids are learning. Like, I really do.
There's a really good sociologist. She's very popular now, Brene Brown. She has several books. She had a TED Talk. She's been on Oprah. And I really like her stuff. And she talks a lot about vulnerability and shame. And one thing she writes about, and she's primarily writing about the U.S., but I think Canada is, influenced by the U.S., is that there's a culture now of fear. There's a culture of fear of failure. And so maybe that's what I'm feeling. It's like a real fear from my students of failing, getting 65. And I feel like I didn't have that same fear as much when I was in school. I remember once I wrote a play instead of an essay between like Karl Marx and John Locke. And that was a big risk. And you know what? My professor liked it. It was not what I was supposed to do, but I got the point across, and I got extra points for being creative. And I feel like now you kind of get marked down for that.
It's like I can recall doing a speech in an English class, and I walked up to my speech with 3 points on a piece of paper, and my prof said, "Is that all you're handing in?" I said, "Watch." And I rattled off a 10-minute speech with 3 points on the paper, fluid. And he looked at me and said, "Okay, I don't even want to see the notes behind it, done." So sometimes you have to take a risk. And I think a lot of it comes from, to be honest, I think kids are having problems, not kids, young adults, are having problems finding their support system. So using a company like yours is a support system. Finding the right friends and family is a support system. And by the way, support doesn't mean, you didn't get an A, so what's wrong with you? That's not support. Support is finding the right positive people to keep the energy level up to be able to learn effectively and share ideas. That's support. And and we're very much in a society where marks almost matter more than the ability to do stuff. So some of the brightest people I know, mark-wise, if you put them in front and say, "Now, apply what you learned," they can't do it because they're true academics. And what they haven't learned is how to apply what they learned. And that's the next step. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
So in business, as a business owner, what has been your biggest challenge?
I think balance is the biggest challenge. I feel actually better that I have an office to go to, and that helps a lot. Like, I don't have the internet at home. I don't have a TV. I try to stay off my phone so that when I go home, like, I try to, like, take a break. But I think as a business owner, and especially in the modern world with all this technology, it's really hard to draw the line, and it's really hard to stop working, and it's really hard to not feel guilty.
Yeah.
Like, it's Monday, but it's my day off, but really, what am I doing now? I could reply to this person's text. So the guilt, and then also the fear, if I don't reply to their text today, like, they'll be gone tomorrow, because we live in such a fast-paced society. So I think finding a way to relax on the downside and create those boundaries and the balance and the space and that kind of thing.
I would agree with you. I mean, I know, like, as you know, I work from home. And one of the things I do is when my wife is working, when she's out of the house for a day, the minute she walks in, I drop what I'm doing pretty well at the end of the day. And I drop it. Now, if I've got stuff to do, I might pick it back up. Jill goes to bed early, but earlier than I do. But I'll drop it because your family time and your balance is important. You can't miss family stuff. You can't miss friend stuff. I think email and text are the biggest causes of that. And as you know, on my email, I've actually got a note up saying I reply to emails within 48 hours. Now, usually I get back to them faster than that, but, you know, the reality is that sets an expectation. And if you set the expectations right, then the balance comes into play, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's smart.
So you got to find a way to maintain that. So we've talked about that a little bit. Now, what is the biggest thing that you've learned being a business owner?
The biggest, there's so many things I've learned. Okay, what is the biggest thing?
Or a couple of things you've learned. Yeah.
Okay, this may sound not really cruel, but so the other day my mom said this to me, and because I'm a very helpful person, and really I want to help people, I want to see people do better, and I would do what I'm doing, like if we lived in a communist society or whatever and we don't get paid for things, you know, this is what I would be doing.
Yeah.
So what my mom said to me though, but Lisa, this is a business, not a charity. And so I think, yeah, the biggest thing I learned and continue to learn is maybe you can't help everybody.
Yeah.
And there's different places people can go for different types of help.
Yes.
So it's okay for me to say, listen, I can help this kind of client, but a different kind of client might not be the best fit for me. So I guess it's kind of maybe like your podcast I just listened to today about the importance of saying no.
Yep.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm not totally making sense, but
you are. I mean, I
think, yeah, like it's okay to set that boundary and say no, and you don't have to help everyone, and really you need to protect your energy, your business, your bottom line, like all these things, and not feel bad about it. And I think a lot of this, and not to get too much into gender roles, but I feel like a lot of this is really difficult for women in business.
Yeah, more than men.
Because we're conditioned, when we're young, to be very generous and giving, and it's very difficult to say no, not only at work, but in others. You don't want to hurt people's feelings. Like all this kind of idea about you have to be like polite and kind and nice, and if you're not, still society will put you in a box of, you know, you're cold-hearted blank. So I think it's really tricky I think it's tricky for everyone in business, but it's particularly tricky if you're a woman. Yeah. To say no and to be okay with that, and be okay with some of the backlash you might get. Yep. That's going to be not about your business, but actually about you as a woman. Yeah. So.
I think that's absolutely bang on. And one of the reasons I did that was I've gone through this personally, a bad phase lately where I've said no to a lot of people for a lot of things. And people forget, because I work from home, it doesn't mean I don't have things to do during the day. People forget that my priorities after work are my family. People forget. And I've gone through this phase where people will call me who, they don't call me to see how I am. They don't reach out and say, how you doing? They call me when there's something they need. And
Yeah.
I always kind of look at the relationship and say, okay, is this a good friend? Yes. Have we helped each other mutually? Yes. Then I spend some time helping them. Yeah, are they calling me because they need something and I haven't heard from them in 6 months? Yes. Then the first word out of my mouth is the word no. And they often say to me, why? And I frankly say, because I don't want to. And I don't qualify, because the worst thing you can do is say maybe, or I'll think about it. Because if you know you really don't want to do it, just say you don't want to do it. Or say, I don't want to do it, but I know somebody else that can help you. Now, that somebody might charge them or not charge them, that's up to them. And they don't want that, because often what they're looking for is to help without spending the expense. So you kind of got to say, no, I'm not going there.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing also, like doing business with a friend or like, I don't know, people have a hard time like seeing you in another hat.
I know.
Like, okay, this is Lisa or Rob, my friend. This is Lisa or Rob at work. And it's almost like if they had to go to a place of work, like say you're like a doctor, and they went to the doctor to see you and they know you, I don't think they would have the same expectations. Like somehow they can understand that in some way. I mean, not all people, but I feel like it's easier. Like, you know.
Yeah.
But if you're doing your own thing, running your own business, it's sometimes hard for people to get. Like,
oh, it is. And I think what a business owner needs to do is start setting those boundaries early, because the earlier you set them, the easier it becomes. And that's been my opinion. Like I set them early with some people, and it's just easier. So they know what the answer is going to be before you go there, if you know what I mean. So
yeah,
that's hard. I agree. So in the academic space, what is the one thing Lisa would change if you could?
What's the one thing I would change?
In the academic space tomorrow. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you change?
Hard to explain. I think, and this might be kind of like romantic, but I feel like the ancient Greeks kind of had education right, or more right. And it might not be possible to do that anymore, but what I'm talking about is if you read Plato or Aristotle or know about Socrates, the way they used to teach is they used to literally wander around with their mentor in a garden or wherever and talk about ideas or try out little experiments. And there was a kind of deeper, more collegial relationship between the teacher and the student.
Mm-hmm.
And even in Chinese philosophy, like Confucius kind of expected that eventually, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's paraphrases as that, eventually the student will teach the teacher. And so this idea that education is a relationship, and your teacher doesn't necessarily know more than you or is like super brilliant or something. It's just that maybe they know a little bit more than you at that moment because they have more experience.
Yeah.
But you can learn from each other.
I agree.
I learn a lot from my students because especially they're way better at technology and like the thing, like what's going on in the contemporary world than me. Mm-hmm. Because things change so much, and I learn a lot from them about that. So yeah, I think now the classes are so big. Like for example, at U of T, like some classes are thousands of students to one professor. Like that's the size of my small town.
Yeah.
That I grew up in. Imagine if there was one teacher for every single person in an entire town.
Yeah.
So like, and I think that's really the source of a lot of these issues that I'm seeing with the, like, fear of failure, the not having fun, the not learning life skills, the having a hard time transitioning from school to career, the lack of support, the mental health issues, is because it's very isolating.
So true.
You're just a number. And especially if you're a young adult, like, this is the point in your life when you really need mentors and support. And I'm very grateful that I had some really good professors in undergrad. Like, some I still keep in touch with, a few of them actually. And I wouldn't have gone to China, and I wouldn't have learned Chinese. I wouldn't even have my Chinese name if it wasn't for my one East Asian Studies professor. And so, to me, that's what a teacher is, and I think we're kind of losing that.
Oh, I would agree with you. I mean, I'm not a university grad. I am a college grad, but I keep learning. I keep taking courses. The big difference with college is when you got in the second year and third year, the classroom sizes were smaller. I used to have a couple instructors who used students to the best of their ability to help their classes and challenge them. So I was lucky that way. A couple I'm still in really big, I still talk to. They're retired, but we talk. And I even have and I might have shared this with you in conversation, I even had an old debating high school coach out of Quebec when I was 15 who's retired that I still talk to, a mentor of mine. Yeah. And without him, I don't know if I'd be in many places that I am now. I mean, there's no question. Yeah. And those mentors are important. And I think people need to go out and seek them and help. And I think anybody, as long as people are organized, like I know I've had people come to me and ask me to spend time, and as long as they're organized and actually want to get it, I have all the time in the world for people, because they have to learn somehow, and that's so hard.
I think our society really focuses so much on being self-reliant and this like myth of like being this independent kind of like I can't think of the word, but you know, because America is sort of built on this person that shows up and it's this wilderness and you turn it into something, and somehow there's this idea that they did it on their own. But listen up, the strength of human beings compared to a lot of other mammals is that we're social and we help each other out. Like, compared to other animals, we're pretty vulnerable. We don't have claws, we don't have big teeth, we can't see at night, you know, we don't fly, we don't have fur. Like, we're pretty vulnerable creatures, and the reason we're able to achieve so much as animals, let us not forget we're animals, is that we're social, and we put our ideas together, and we work in teams, and we build things as a team. And so I think we need to remember that, and that's the important role of a teacher or a mentor, is to kind of bring people together with different talents, or help them to foster their talents and go off and do what, you know, they're meant to do.
I would agree with that. I mean, I know even in my business today, one of the places I go is there's a couple really great discussion groups on of all places, Facebook, where people bounce business ideas off each other every day in my space. And that's important, because a lot of us either work on our own or work, you know, differently. And that social aspect has to come in to impact. And I think those people who don't get to social impact are actually the ones who end up in the mental health issues with the anxiety, the stress, the loneliness, because they're not getting out there. And in the end, it doesn't benefit them very well, actually.
Right. And just this idea that business is about competition. And it is about competition to a certain extent because, you know, you want to provide something different. Mm-hmm. You want to do a little bit better than the next guy. But also, who are you competing against? And ultimately, I think you should be competing against yourself more than XYZ business. And also, that doesn't mean you can't collaborate.
That's true.
Like if you look at big companies, like successful companies, I'm reading a book, not with me right now, I can't remember it. The title, not as good as Rob at remembering book titles, but
Thanks.
And I've been reading a long time, not as fast as Rob at reading books, but the guy who created Air Miles. And one of the points of loyalty programs is creating like connections between multiple businesses.
Yes.
So if you look at Air Miles, you can collect Air Miles at many different places. Yep. And this helps all the businesses on the with Air Miles to grow, because someone with an Air Miles card, they're going to go to Shell, and then I think Shell is on Air Miles.
They are.
And then they're going to go to, you know, like Sobeys or Metro or something. Shop maybe. Yeah. I think you can also get them at Sobeys now. So.
And the LCBO.
Right, and yeah, that's true. So these businesses, in a way, I mean, they're not really directly collaborating, but they kind of are, and it's not. They're not compete. Like if they're competing with each other with different loyalty programs, they might not do as well. That's not the best example, but also you can see lots of businesses with partnerships, and really, I think those are the more success. Like that's how you can become more successful. You can't just kind of just be on your own and like being the best at what you do, unless you're some sort of super genius. Yep. And even then, I don't know if it would work out.
No, I agree with that. So true. And it just. And sometimes you need those collaborations to grow, and people don't get that. So next question, and we're gonna, they don't, and it is kind of, and I know you have a website. Do you have 3 online tools that help you in your business that you can think of?
Online tools, me and online. Well, I do use Google Docs, Google Drive, all that stuff a lot.
Yep.
It's a good way to collaborate on a project with my students. So I think that's like the top one. With some of my interns and stuff, we've been trying to use Slack and Trello to stay organized in terms of like the projects we're working on, and just having a separate channel of communication, because there's so many different types of communication. So I don't know if that counts as.
Yeah, it does. I've actually stayed out of the Slack rabbit hole personally, but that's.
No, you don't like Slack.
No, kind of the way I look at it is it's another email box. So that's kind of, but it's not for everybody, and for some people it works really well. So that's cool.
Well, I only use it for work.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of good in terms of like setting a boundary. Like, okay, if it's a Slack message, it's a work message. Yep. Or if it's a text, it could be either or.
Yeah.
Or something.
And I guess your website would probably be a third tool, right? To some degree.
It's a tool. You know, it needs work.
Yeah.
We're working on it with Rob.
Yeah, that's okay. So, in the online world, what do you hate most that impacts the way you do business, if anything?
Likes.
Okay.
What do I hate most is likes.
You don't like likes at all?
I mean, I like getting likes, but I think the whole, I think likes are tricky because like it, I don't think they always reflect the value of your content or who you're going to attract, or I think they kind of contribute to the like shame or not feeling good enough or whatever. Like they're kind of superficial, if that makes any sense.
It sure does. It sure does.
On the
And
one side, they're a useful tool. On the other side, they can start to affect your confidence. Like if all of a sudden you're not getting a lot of likes, you might start doubting yourself and stuff. But
you know, it's funny when you talk about that. 10 years ago, if you had a website and you were in the online space, the discussion about an article would happen in the comments section on a blog. And
yeah.
you know, I used to, like, I kind of look back at some past incarnations of business blogs I've done over the years, over 9 years. And I would bet you 7 or 8 years ago, I got 10 times the comments I got today. And part of the problem is people are lazy. And we all know that most of the communication and stuff like that tends to happen on Facebook. So people don't comment on the blog itself anymore. Now, the other thing that's kind of gone on when you talk about likes is we've all heard the term, and I don't know if you have, Lisa, called an airline magazine person. So you'd read an article in the seat pocket that was 2 paragraphs, and the person would think they're an expert. Well, the problem is now, along the term with likes, we've got what I call the headline person. They don't read the article. They base all their generalization on what the headline says.
Yeah.
And that's become, especially with news outlets, it's become a big phenomenon. And you can tell based on the comments, they didn't read the article that was attached, right? So I would agree with you. Likes is probably an issue for a lot of people.
I think we're just saturated with so much information. It's hard to keep track of it all.
Yep. What do you like most about the online world for your business?
For my business? Well, I mean, I think that you can reach people and do business with people you traditionally maybe couldn't. Like I said, my first student was in Japan because I could teach her English using Skype. Like now, there's more tools. Like Zoom might be better today, but you know, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I made that contact when I was in China, and then I was able to continue the lessons for a few years after because of those kind of tools. So I think it expands our world, our kind of markets, our connections, and that's the benefit of the internet.
It actually can even expand friendships. I mean, I've got a really good friend of mine who's done some work for me in past, and he's in India. And we already had a conversation this morning. Now India's about 12 hours ahead of us. But I don't think there's a week that goes by that we don't talk for 15 minutes on a Zoom call, and there's a constant message box open. So, I mean, you know, you have people like that. Like, where could you develop friends all over this country and all over the world, or business or associates or anything without the internet? I strongly agree with that. So
yeah, I mean, I'm able to keep in touch with, like, one of my friends just messaged me from Italy on WhatsApp, and I met her in China. Like, we went to school in China together. Yeah, so Facebook, all this social media, it really helps me to keep in touch with people. I mean, I live far away from my family.
Yep.
So that's the benefit.
No,
I
agree.
stuck to the business answer because you asked your business.
Yeah, but it's sometimes business and personal go hand in hand too, right? So, but the point is, you couldn't do business. I mean, I spend a lot of time on conference calls, and I couldn't run the way you did. I had a professor in college back in 1987, and his dream was to be able to sit on a beach with a laptop and run his business. And I had lunch. I had lunch with him the other day, and people thought he was crazy. His name was Bill Warren, and he used to call him Billy Bob. People thought he was crazy. I always maintained Bill was a visionary. I had lunch with him a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "Do you ever remember that dream of yours?" And we got talking about the whole dream. And I said, "You laid it out really nicely." And in 1988, the technology, the internet wasn't there. The stuff wasn't there. There were some academic networks, but that was it. And his dream is a reality. So, you know.
Is he on the beach now?
I wish she's retired. Lisa, thanks for joining me. Where can people get a hold of you, and what's the best way they can find you if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, well, you can look up my website, which is my last name, which is www.pfau.ca, and Pfau is P as in Peter, F as in Frank, AU. Mm-hmm. Or you can text me, because if I'm with a student, often I don't answer the phone. So my number is 647-785-2387. Or you can find me all over social media if you just look for, like, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn is my name, Lisa Pfau. But if you look for Pfau_academic writing, then I should pop up.
And if you're looking on Instagram, Lisa has a really cool comic book feature that she uses to talk about things in the academic world. You should check it out. So thanks so much, Lisa, and have a great day.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for listening to the SDM Business, Marketing, and WordPress podcast. This show is hosted by Robert Cairns, the CEO and Chief Creator of Amazing Ideas at StunningDigitalMarketing.com. This podcast comes out on a weekly basis with multiple episodes during the week. If you'd like to be a guest on this podcast, please email us at podcasts@StunningDigitalMarketing.com. If you'd like to find more about digital marketing services we provide, please go to StunningDigitalMarketing.com. If you're interested in all projects our CEO and Chief Creator of Amazing Ideas, Robert Cairns, is working on, please go to robertbcairns.com. This podcast is dedicated to Robert's late father, Bruce Cairns. Have an amazing day. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.